While driving toward New Cumberland, we saw a light hovering near a hillside. John Voinovich, an attorney from Weirton, West Virginia, said, describing his experience on the evening of October 7th, 1966. The lights started coming toward the car, and I guess my son was frightened, and I slowed the car so that we were a good distance behind the object. The object had an outer circular light that glowed, but there was no sound at all. I stopped the car for a better look, and the things started coming down over the highway. I think it was about 400 feet in the air. That's a little snippet from the Mothman Prophecies, based on true events, by John A. Keel. Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Stench of Truth. You know, I would like to come on here every day and give you concrete answers for how you can affect change that would be meaningful for you, your family, your friends, your community, etc. And I would also like to reassure people who still have an optimistic outlook as far as how things are going to turn out in the future. I don't think that it is in any way productive for people to look at things from an optimistic or a pessimistic point of view anymore. I think one needs to be a realist and realize what the facts are as they stand. And in reality, what we have seen is a grand reluctance on the part of elected officials everywhere around the world, no matter what country you're in, to completely ignore the people that they supposedly represent within the government system of the country that they're in. And we have seen this played out time and time again, where it has been made virtually a written in stone fact that the governments and thereby the people of any given country will be made to be the scapegoats and have to pay for the excess of the fraudulent activities of bankers and corporations. Now, we have seen some referendum votes like in Iceland, and we did see some activity going against this in Ireland as well, where the people have voted to not pay for the fiascos of the banks. And remember, what we're talking about here are fraudulent derivatives, for the most part, that were packaged up and deliberately by ratings agencies given AAA ratings for garbage. Now, these are the same ratings agencies that through this entire debt crisis in the United States were crying and moaning about how they would have to downgrade the United States credit rating because of the quote-unquote debt crisis. And of course, Standard & Poor's is set to do this, apparently. Now, in my mind, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and all the other of these ratings agencies, for their support of fraudulent securities and fraudulent rating systems that allowed the entire housing bubble and crash and derivatives destruction that led to the economic depression of the world, they should all be put in jail, along with Wall Street and a good number of corporate CEOs and upper management. And the fact that we do not see this is indicative that the governments are not going to do anything about it. The power no longer resides within the government itself. It is within the corporations and the banking and the finance sectors directly. And one can see this by the surreality of the entire program being played out within the political spectrum. It has no basis in reality whatsoever. It is so ludicrous and comical that it is something that you would expect to see on a sitcom on television, rather than actually being promoted and talked about with a straight face by people who are supposedly elected to represent you, but in actual fact, they don't. And they never did, and they never will. the very fact that the little representation that you had in Congress, as tiny and minuscule and virtually non-existent as it was, is now going to be taken away from you in favor of a super Congress, which will have as its goal the gutting and destruction of further downgrading and elimination of social programs. Supposedly set up in a way that would encourage equal cuts across the board, but in actual fact it is being it was set up and it is going to be used as a means to destroy completely all the rest of the social programs in this country. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, every other program that is designed to help the poor, the working poor, the middle class, people on disability, seniors, everybody who is not rich, in other words. Every program that does not help the rich will be cut. And the government will be in the business solely of promoting the continued accumulation of wealth by the wealthy. And Barack Obama is the key #1 person in this regard. He is the one that is making this possible. And it is only by him being in the office of president that we have the situation that we have right now. So I would like to give you solutions, and I would like to be optimistic about where our chances lie, but in reality I cannot do that because there are no easy answers, because all the answers require that people become very actively engaged in opposing the kind of oppression that we're going to see. And the fact of the matter is that people are lazy and people will not do it. I hear a lot of people call for strikes, and I've called for them myself, and doing a lot of other things that require a massive amount of people to enable any kind of change. And even then, you're not guaranteed that your voice will be heard, because in Greece, they just basically ignored the people's will, even though they were out in the streets in force, engaging in all types of activity. I have expressed how shutting down commerce might be effective, but once again, the only way that that can be effective is if it is done on a massive scale and coordinated. And the fact of the matter is that we are never going to see that happen here. And I do not want to sound defeatist, because I do think that there is still hope that we can get out of the mess that we're headed towards with a global scheme and with the further destruction of this country, and indeed the sovereignty of every country around the world, and the further erosion of this country into basically the military arm of the global elite. And that will mean more wars, more death, more destruction, more money into the military-industrial complex, even as every single thing that the government does for the poor, middle class, seniors, disabled, handicapped, anything that the government does for anybody except the rich will be utterly and completely destroyed. And that is exactly where we are headed. It'll be a government by and for the wealthy and corporations only. And not only will you have no voice, but you will be rendered mute by laws that prevent you from expressing yourself or trying to throw off the shackles of tyranny of the corporatocracy. So I'm not very optimistic, but I am a realist. If enough people did become involved and take concrete steps in the right direction to shut down commerce, to go on strike, to prevent business from being conducted, the bottom line of profits of companies would be affected, and there would have to be some change that would be done in a positive way. But the fact of the matter is that people in this country are so apathetic and so inured to what is going on. They have been beaten and beaten so effectively that they feel as though they have no power. And because their neighbor will not go first, they will not either. So what we see is a lot of individuals talking about what should be done and nobody actually taking any action and trying to organize something. And I fear that this is the case, and that's where it's going to lead to. The only way that we really have any hope is for some sort of incident to occur, which then snowballs. And that is still a possibility. And it is probably the only one that has any real way of affecting positive change in this country, because I just don't see any kind of grassroots movement to rise up and to oppose all of this. And remember, I understand the problems that there are with social programs, with Social Security, Medicare, and all these kinds of things. Okay, but one thing you need to remember is a lot of people talk about how the Social Security Trust Fund just has quote-unquote IOUs in it. Those IOUs are treasury bonds, and the treasury bonds that are in that trust fund are just as valid as treasury bonds that anybody else holds. So if you buy a government bond, you have as much right to be repaid the money of that government bond as China does, as any other country or individual does. And the same thing goes for the Social Security Trust Fund. And because it has a dedicated revenue stream, and so does Medicare, even though there are some things that could be done to make the programs better, and the one that I've highlighted so much for Social Security is just to eliminate the cap on earnings that would be subject to Social Security taxes. And that would effectively mean that Social Security would be solvent forever. Okay? But you're not ever going to see any of these things ever take place, because not only would they be opposed if they ever were even raised in a public venue, but the system of control is so much in place right now that in any kind of political discussion, you can't even raise the point. You can't even raise what would be a populist position within any type of political setting. Those words will not even get out of your mouth in that setting, because you're limited and restricted in what you can say and what you can do. And the fact that the police state is cracking down in this country as well serves to chide people. It serves to quiet them and cow them. And they fear for what could be done to them if they decide to go out on the streets and do something. What happens if I'm confronted by a cop? One thing I have to say, just to end things here, is to tell you to never be afraid. Do whatever you can to overcome the fear that you have inside. Whether it's a fear of confronting people, whether it's a fear of talking to people about what's going on, whether it's a fear of encountering authority figures or the police, or whether it's a fear of the government cracking down on you, or a fear of them taking away your internet, or a fear of them stripping you away of your rights, or a fear of you going to some secret prison somewhere. Whatever your fear is, try to overcome that fear, because fear ultimately is what is the retarding factor within people, and it keeps them from taking action, even when faced with such egregious things that we are faced with in this country today. And we are faced with the systematic destruction of everything that this country could have been, that this country could have been at least a somewhat responsive country to the people that it supposedly serves. But we have been led astray, we have been dismantled and destructed over the last several decades, most prominently, but it started well before then. But in the last several decades it has sped up to such an incredible degree that perhaps people are just numbed by the complete and utter turnaround of this society. But if I could advise you of anything, it would be to try to overcome your fears and realize that you have nothing to fear. You have nothing to fear, and you should fear nothing. And whatever it is that you think is necessary to be done, you should think about ways to do that and overcome your fears in taking those actions that you think will be good, and will be good for the people that are important to you in your life, and that is you, your family, your friends, and your community. Thank you. Good day.